shivers whenever you say that.
Right. Oh no. Oh no, no, no. Once again, here we go. Oh no. Timothy, I don't. Oh, that's too strange.
Oh, yay! You pushed the right button.
Whew. Yes, I know it's always exciting. Once again, I missed, the point, but apologies for that. So, good morning, everybody. Good morning, Timothy, for the people who are watching us on LinkedIn and also YouTube. It's a pleasure to have you here. Everybody knows who you are, Timothy Langley. But so thank you really very much. And so today we're going to have our 129th session of Japanese Politics One-on-One with Timothy Langley and me as a host, Maya Matsuoka. It's a pleasure to have you here once again. Timothy, I'm not going to keep you waiting any longer. So the floor is yours. Let's start.
Thank you very much, Maya, and good morning, everybody. Today is June 30th, 2023. We are just a day away from August. My God, August is typically a kind of an off month. Obon starts in late August. It really gets hot during August. If you can imagine it getting hotter than it is now, it is going to get hotter. And so thank you very much, everybody, for tuning in. Our audience continues to grow. I really appreciate you listening and plugging in every Sunday. If I can ask you, I don't get many clients out of doing this briefing. This is a briefing that I do as a kind of filler for the Replacing Tokyo on Fire, which was a video series that I stopped about 3 or 4 years ago. And Maya and I have been doing this briefing for 2 years. So I just ask that you click like, or you subscribe, or you post a comment, you share this with somebody so that our audience goes out to those people that really need, this kind of information on a regular basis. I know that there are people in the various diplomatic missions and in the embassies that tune in to the YouTube. They like to keep a little bit in the background, not very obvious, because of course they're supposed to already know this stuff. And to them and to people who are competitors with me in my business of providing public affairs and lobbying services to, foreign capital companies, there's no regrets there. It's an open story. I just enjoy telling people about what's going on in Japanese politics, and I'm rewarded when you do provide a link or a click, or you link up with either me or Maya or Japan Expert Insights with a connection request. So please continue to do that. It's been very active in this last week of July. The Prime Minister, as you know, came back from a week in Saudi Arabia, the United Arab Emirates, and Qatar just last week. And so this week he has been spending time on domestic issues. We're going to talk about that. But judging from the feedback that Maya and I have been receiving, we've been encouraged. Langley, the briefing is very good. Thank you very much. We appreciate the Q&A. So the one of the requests was that most of the people in the briefing are a little bit more experienced, just be a little bit more brisk in going through some of the issues. And so I'm going to try that today. And if that resonates, then maybe we cook in the pace, because the level of understanding and just the appreciation for what's going on in Japanese politics, it has been a little bit more established. We've been doing this for 2 years, so I don't want to say the same thing over and over again. I just want to hit the high points. And then as we wrap it up, we can hit the points of greater interest, or maybe something that we didn't talk about in the Q&A. So most of these points are about, Japanese politics, policy, what's going on diplomatically and globally, what's going on region-wise. But, you might have issues about, what's going on with, Big Motor, or what's going on with the sex scandals involving the entertainment industry and that sort of thing that don't really impact directly. But happy to get into that with you, because they all come up in the daily course of what I do as a general course of business. So hitting it right off, the Bank of Japan had their predicted meeting this last week. The governor, Kazuo Ueda, did tweak the yield curve just a little bit, and he announced that they're going to adjust their expectations for inflation. So it's a pretty big deal because it's deep and it's broad. This meeting was anticipated for the last 2.5 months. What is the governor going to say? He's been in office now. He's replaced Mr. Hirohiko Kuroda, who was the Bank of Japan governor for 10 years. And how is his policy? Can you turn your microphone off, please, Maya? I can hear your cat. Thank you. People are in anticipation. How is this policy, this direction from the Bank of Japan going to be different from the longstanding policy of Mr. Kuroda? And this is beginning to come out now. This was kind of his coming out party, where he did actually tweak it. And he said the inflation rate, the target was always, let's hit 2%. He's acknowledged that the country is not at 2%. It is more like, depending on what area of the economy you're looking at. If you're looking at fresh food and vegetables, it's 4.3% of inflation. With other goods, removing foodstuffs and energy, it is more like 3.2% with energy thrown in there. You've got the subsidies that help it keep it low. It's about 3.4%, and those subsidies are coming off actually in August. So the price increases are going to continue. So the tweaking of the yield on bonds, and that's a big deal. That's a 10-year bond. It kind of sets the bellwether of how companies are going to be purchasing Japanese bonds and storing their money, keeping their money there, so that there's a little bit of a guarantee on what their return is going to be. And when they need short-term cash, maybe the rates of return are not as high. But what the Bank of Japan sets as their bond rate kind of dictates what else is going to go on with other parts of the economy. So it's incredibly important to keep watching that. So as a consequence of that, the Japanese government, they have a labor committee that just announced on Friday that the minimum wage will now be raised to 1,000 yen. And that was a policy prerogative already announced by Prime Minister Abe when he was alive and he was prime minister. He said, by 2023, we should be hitting about 1,000 yen per hour. And this is the minimum wage. So this is a different kind of setup than the spring offensive that occurs in April, and the labor unions get together and they negotiate with management. These are employed people. They've got trades. They've got skilled jobs. They are like seishain in these large companies, and they set the price for general labor, getting bonuses and their hourly wage. The issue that was decided or proposed on Friday was the minimum wage, the people who are at the lower end, and the dictates are you cannot pay anybody less than that. So for Tokyo, the minimum wage is 1,000 yen, thereabouts, probably just a little bit north of 1,000 yen per hour. And the instructions are that depending on the geography and the industry, there can be a little bit of fluctuation depending on what the prefecture decides. But the central government has stated the aim is 1,000 yen per hour. So if you're in Akita or Okinawa, perhaps the wages are a little bit different. But this is pretty significant, following on the heels of what the Bank of Japan is doing with their inflation rate. So the inflation predictions now by Mr. Ueda are that the inflation is being recognized now as beyond 2%. It is recognized to be about 2.3%. And the predictions are that throughout this year, it will continue to be at around a 2.5 or 2.6%. And looking forward for next year, it'll come down a little bit, maybe towards 1.9 is the prediction. I think it's a hope for prediction. So who knows? So there's a very delicate balance there. It's kind of like balancing stones. You've seen these guys on YouTube who balance stones by the riverside. Balancing the economy is kind of like that. And so the Bank of Japan is very, very sensitive to too much or too little. Other economies in Europe and in the United States are a little bit more expansive. Japan is an outlier in keeping a very loose monetary policy. Interest rates are almost at 0%, so you can borrow money relatively easy here if you need it. And it does enhance a bit of the inflation, and they're trying to catch that up so that the economy kind of takes off. They've been in the doldrums now for almost 30 years. They're looking for that recipe that kicks them off. So we'll continue to watch what's going on with the Bank of Japan. North Korea fired 2 rockets on Monday of last week. Right in the middle of the night, they fired 2 rockets that went about almost 400 kilometers. Very high trajectory, about 100 kilometers up in the air and then coming down. This is perceived to be in anticipation of the great parade that they had on Thursday. There was a huge parade in North Korea. And for the first time, China sent a delegation. Actually, North Korea has basically been closed down due to COVID, so there haven't been very many delegations going, no tourists. But China did send a delegation, and also Russia did too. And there was a big display of military might and the rockets and the tanks and all of that stuff. So it was a big deal, lots of fireworks. So everybody was happy. So this was the celebration of the 70th armistice between between South Korea and North Korea. They were at war, and between 1950 and 1953, and they decided in 1953 on this date, on Thursday, to seek a cessation of hostilities. They didn't sign a peace agreement, so technically the 2 countries are still at war. And in fact, after that, things didn't work out quite so well, and they had the Korean War, which was pretty much run by the United States. And then the demarcation on the parallel that separates North Korea and South Korea. So it is still in a state of hostility. And that demarcation, there is a point, checkpoint Charlie, where there are meeting sides. That's where Trump met with our great leader, Kim Jong-un. Famously, it stepped over the line, and they got their picture taken there. That is the line that is the spot where Travis King sprinted across last week. And there is no news from that. The U.S. military is really concerned about his whereabouts and his well-being. Private Travis King was maybe a 24-year-old private first class who was, I guess, disgruntled, or he was in a little bit of trouble with his officers in South Korea. He was scheduled to be shipped back to Travis Air Force Base in the United States to undergo disciplinary action. And the day before he was to be flown out, he escaped his police escort and came back into Seoul and got on a tour, and then just sprinted across as he was in his civvies and pretended to be just part of the tour. And he sprinted across the demarcation. I guess you've heard about that, but it's a pretty big deal, and it's pretty topical right now. What will happen with him is yet to be seen. Most of the people who have been arrested or have fled into North Korea for whatever reason, the Americans, there's been about maybe 10 over the last 15 years. Nothing good has happened to them, and getting them out is always a neat trick. So we'll see what happens with that, and keep our eye on that. July has, this is not news to you, July has proven to be the hottest month on record in Japan, and today we're not even through July. So the Meteorological Association has already stated that July is the hottest month in recorded since I've been keeping records in Japan. And I think that is the same story throughout Europe, the United States, places in China as well. These fires that are being ignited spontaneously in China, in Canada, very famously in Canada, and also the island of Rhodes. I mean, they had to be in Greece. They had to evacuate the tourists that were there because of the forest fires that were just ignited because of the heat and because of the atmospheric. So it's a huge deal. It is probably the hottest summer, going to be the hottest summer on record. And we're just in July, so we're moving into August, and it will be a hot one too. So keeping your eye on that, and it does implicate lots of different things. So for example, once the temperature reaches like 40 degrees centigrade, many things begin to happen. The weight of the air is not enough to support the typical flying of aircraft. So they have to, when the temperature reaches that that level, the airlines need to ask people to deplane or take some of the luggage off because the plane just can't make a flight. They need longer runways. They need more air in order to take off. So that's an impact there. And also photosynthesis ceases after 40 degrees. So that's an interesting thing. Plants actually begin to shut down. They don't start pumping water into the air and converting carbon monoxide into oxygen as a consequence of that. So it is a pretty big deal. Another interesting piece of news that has come out is everybody knows what the Osprey is. The Osprey it used to be the Huey helicopters, which were the horses of labor for the U.S. Marines. And they transitioned that out to Ospreys, where their rotary blades are plane-like, but they can turn into a helicopter-like configuration. And this is the workhorse for the Marines now. They have been deployed in Okinawa for the last maybe 15 years. They did have a couple of problems with, pieces falling off and landing in schoolyards and working out the kinks, but they seem to be the standard vehicle now for the U.S. Marines. And they are being not exported, but their zone of operation is being expanded significantly. So they were regulated to be only in Okinawa Prefecture and the islands around there. They are now going to be on the mainland throughout the islands of Japan by government agreement. So all of this work that Mr. Kishida has been doing with the United States and Joe Biden, and the agreements and all of the meetings that they've had, this is coming out now. The fruition is that the Ospreys now, they will always be flying in a pair, but you will be seeing them now throughout the main island, particularly in the forested areas and in the mountains. They're going through training exercises with the self-defense forces of Japan, and they're really ramping this up. So it is a significant escalation. They have kind of carte blanche. It appears that the United States owns the flight zones, the flight air throughout Japan, and without too much of a controversial discussion about it, it was just agreed. And so these Ospreys now, you're likely to see them. So if you see a kind of a weird configuration in the sky, it's probably an Osprey, but not in the populated areas right now. But you will be seeing them in Aomori, Hokkaido, Fukui, Fukushima, and down in Kyushu as well. So it's an escalation, I guess. It is preparation for certain contingencies. At the same time, they're having evacuation drills in some of the southern islands surrounding Okinawa, not Okinawa proper, but some of the outlying islands that are closer to Taiwan. So this advanced preparation is really starting to kick off, and it's a worrying signal, but I think it's probably a recognition of the reality of the times. So we need to keep a sharp eye out on that, because that also implicates the defense capacity of Japan, and also this military industrial complex that Japan doesn't quite have, but it looks like it wants to get. The prime minister has said we need to have more homegrown defense equipment, not only with defensive capabilities, but also offensive capabilities. So there's a lot going on there to shore up the creation or the embellishment of what Japan already has in terms of defense manufacturing capabilities, a new industry actually for Japan. The population in all 47 prefectures has experienced population decline. This is the first time this month where all prefectures have unified population decline. So it used to be that Okinawa was the, although it's the poorest prefecture in Japan, it has the highest rate of birth. It has the highest number of births per capita in Japan, but they also suffered a decline. And so this is somewhat worrisome. As you know, the prime minister has said he is going to exercise unprecedented efforts in boosting the capacity of Japanese women to have children. That sounds like a weird way of saying enhancing the population, but that's kind of what it is. He's really scratching his head on how to do that. And I think the Japanese population, although they hear the flowery words that he's going to take unprecedented action and he is devoting, an enormous amount of money over a 3-year period to address this issue, I think people are not quite buying it. So the announcement that 47 prefectures in unison have suffered from a decline is noteworthy. Currently, the Japanese population stands at 122.42 million people. This year, that's a decline of 800,000 people just this last year. The foreign population is beginning to have an uptick. So the Japanese population is beginning to diminish. The number of foreigners that are living in Japan, in fact, is beginning to increase. They currently occupy about 10.7% of the entire population. That's pretty huge, especially for a country like Japan. For those of you who have been interacting with this country for your careers or for a decade or so, you understand how big that is. And that number of 10% equals about almost 3 million foreigners. China, Vietnam, and South Korea occupy about 50% of that. So that tells you what the spread is. It's not the white countries. It's not the Europeans. It's certainly not the Americans. It's China by far, South Korea, and Vietnam. So those are the big three that are coming to Japan. They're investing. They're bringing their kids. They're hiring people. A lot of that is going on in Okinawa, funny enough. So it's something to watch out for. We talked about the population decline. We talked about the Marine Corps and the expansion of the Ospreys and a little bit of a kick up for the military spending. It turns out now that the Japanese are just on a roll in terms of military exercises. So they are having rocket exercises in Australia. There is a firing zone in Australia. They just fired a new anti-ship rocket that was developed by the Japanese. They fired it for the first time without a munitions warhead, but they're experimenting now in Australia. They have a broader range of experimentation that they can do there rather than in Japan. So they're doing that in conjunction with the Australians, with the Americans, with the Brits. And this test firing occurred on Friday. So that will continue on, and they're trying to develop their own homegrown defense capabilities with these land to ship capabilities. They hope to deploy this in 2025, in a couple of years. And in the meantime, come up with something that can be ship deployed. And then after that, the technology just continues to increase to an air deployed similar delivery system. The other thing that's going on is that the French are sending over fighter aircraft. They are already here for joint exercises with the Self-Defense Forces Air Force here. And it's not just the French. The French are here now. They've brought over maybe 4 different kinds of fighters and a tanker. So they're doing exercises in conjunction with the self-defense, the jets of the Self-Defense Forces. They're similarly matching that with a tanker, with follow-up, with different kinds of aircraft than what the French are providing. But it's not just them. It's also happening with the Australians, with the Brits. They're also coming over. In August, there will be a contingent from Britain with similar types of aircraft, jet aircraft, for defense capabilities, enhancement and collaboration, cooperation. So that is going on. It's been going on for a long time with the United States, but this is the first time for this collaboration to be occurring here in Japan with so much foreign investment and foreign defense capabilities involvement. So we are really on a roll when you take a look at it. Minister of Defense, it's not Minister, Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin was actually in the region as well. He was in Papua New Guinea just this week, visiting with them and signing agreements that have been discussed for a long time. I think President Biden was supposed to go to Papua New Guinea after the G7. He canceled that because of health or scheduling. I forget what it was, but he didn't go to Papua New Guinea. It was very much looked forward to. Finally, Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin is in Papua New Guinea this week and signing a lot of different defense capability agreements. And interestingly enough, part of the agreements are that the United States is going to be able to station troops and warships there, Coast Guard, and so the capabilities of the Coast Guard will be lent to, although operated by the United States, to Papua New Guinea for defense outreach capabilities. So it looks like this is really going to increase. I think they're trying to keep Papua New Guinea away from the Belt and Road initiatives of the Chinese government, but there's a lot going on in the islands and in the entire Pacific region. I don't know if you're following it. I think I announced or reported on it last week that there are joint naval exercises between China and Russia this week, and they started last week. They're still continuing now. Similarly, there are joint exercises between South Korea, the United States, and Japan occurring in the southern region of the Japan Sea. And these are live fire exercises. They're really coming together. They're having a lot of exercises here. The ballistic missile equipped submarine visited Busan just 2 weeks ago. That was a big deal there. And this flotilla of Chinese and Russian ships just passed through the straits separating Hokkaido from Sakhalin just this last week. So they are also on live fire drills. There's a flotilla of probably 15 vessels. They're doing, air to ship reconnaissance and exercises there. But that's got to be very worrying that they're having such a big exercise at the same time. So the tension just continues to mount. And we haven't even started to talk about Article 9 of the Constitution. Maybe we'll get into that a little bit later. Fukushima water release is still on schedule. The date for that release has not been formally announced, but we anticipate it being in August, probably just before Obon. It's going to cause, it already has caused a lot of concern in South Korea and in China and Hong Kong. Hong Kong has already put a ban on the import of Japanese foodstuffs from 10 prefectures surrounding Fukushima. And China is doing likewise. They don't have it in place yet, but as soon as that water is released, then that ban will go in. The United States and Britain has already released their restrictions on imports of food from Fukushima and produce. So that was in anticipation of the water release. So the coalition, the coalescing of forces just continues. We report about it all the time, but you can really see the dynamic yield going on right now if you're watching these things in a whole setting. So I hope I'm presenting that to you so that you can grasp that. So this water release is going to trigger a lot of reactions in the region. You don't hear so much about it from the United States or from Europe, but the Atomic Energy Commission is hosting a on-site office there, and they're having people that are watching it. South Korea has observers that will be housed there as well. I don't know for how long, but the United States, Korea, and Japan have been somewhat successful in reducing the amount of complaints and tension in South Korea. There's still a very large contingent of South Koreans that hold animosity towards Japan. It is being worked on by President Yoon, by Mr. Kishida, the shuttle diplomacy that has been kicking off. They're having a summit in August with President Joe Biden in Washington, D.C. at Camp David in August. So there's a lot going on in that area as well. We're going to continue to report on that. although it is very hot and it's expensive to run your air conditioner, TEPCO has been told that they need to reduce consumption. So forcibly, they need to tell people, and the Japanese government has also told people in the prefectures of Tokyo, Kanagawa, Chiba, uh, um, uh, right around this area here, Kanagawa, that the consuming public needs to reduce their consumption of electricity because there's not enough capacity. That's happening at a time when consumption is going through the roof because older people and children. I mean, it's almost too hot to even go to the beach and enjoy what the summer is. So it is anticipated that's going to get a little bit worse as we move into August. But the government has told TEPCO and those customers that are receiving their energy from TEPCO to cool it down and lower your keep your thermostats at a reasonable level and try and reduce your consumption. The target is by 5%, and they say if they can't keep it by 5%, then more aggressive measures will be in place. And this is in anticipation of the subsidy for expensive energy costs to be pulled out. And once again, it's going to impact the inflation rate as we experience it now, because inflation is largely dictated by foodstuffs, largely by food and energy costs. And as we've seen, food costs continue to rise, especially the fresh food. And with the energy subsidy coming off, you can anticipate that the inflation is going to have a bump up. And I think that explains why Governor Ueda has tweaked the system and has announced that he's not going to stick to the 2% target. He appreciates that the inflation is going up. He's targets it now at about 2.3. He understands it might go to 2.9 before it begins to cool down. So it's also something to watch out for, and also impacts on the minimum wage as well. The new chip equipment export rules took place this last week. They started on Wednesday. That is a restriction placed on Japanese manufacturing companies who produce the higher quality manufacturing process and devices to make chips. And it is all directed at China. China, you can't have these manufacturing processes anymore that Japan excels at. You can't buy our equipment or our chemicals because the United States has restrictions placed on you. It was at one time called decoupling, decouple from the reliance on the trade issues and the revenue that you get with China, not just Japan, but to everybody. But with regard to chip production, the Japanese are required to somewhat kowtow to the dictates of the United States Commerce Department and withdraw that. So that went into effect. China is not taking it very nicely. They've wagged their finger at Japan. China China is the number one importer of Japanese goods. So Japan is dancing a very fine line and trying to keep that balance, keep the United States happy with export controls on some of these high-end military use type chip productions that is going on in China. The Japanese manufacturers are not taking it nicely because if the major trading partner with Japan is China, that means that the major consumers of the products built by these chip manufacturers is likewise going to be China as well. So there's a hit to the economy and also some concessions that the Japanese government needs to make to those companies that are suffering from that. So this idea of having chip manufacturing in Kumamoto and also in Arizona continues to take a high energy, and there has to be other markets that fill those demands that are being restricted in the export controls that are being implemented just this week. The Japanese government has decided, interestingly enough, to dedicate 300 billion yen to Japanese universities. So I think for a lot of people that are on this briefing, like me, maybe you benefited from Monbusho or having a scholarship coming here. I received a Monbusho scholarship and went to law school in Sendai. But I think there are a lot of people that started their relationship with Japan in that way. And I think if you've experienced education in Japan, especially higher education, it's not all that it's cranked up to be. The facilities are not that great. The housing is expensive. And the social life of Japanese university students is not as kind of exciting as it is in Europe or United States or in Australia. But the Japanese government has decided they're going to be investing. This is, 300 billion works out to about $2.1 billion over a 5-year period for these universities. They have identified 11 universities that are going to be getting an enormous amount of money to turn their focus a little bit less away from the humanities and more towards the scientific and the technical aspects of education. So this is a kind of a nod to the Prime Minister's efforts and the government of Japan's efforts to make Japan a digital society and make the government, the running of the government, and enhance the capabilities and the technical experience of Japanese citizens so that they can handle more of a digital society. So that's a big deal. And this is how it basically shakes out. So 111 universities will be getting money, and they're encouraged to focus on green energy, greening the economy, and on digital transformation. Japan typically graduates about, I don't know if you know this or not, but most of the graduates of Japanese universities are in the soft humanities, because typically what happens is when they leave the university, they get hired by a company, they join industry or become a bureaucrat. And from the perspective of the companies and the government, that's where they begin to learn. They don't expect them to be coming out of the womb knowing their skills. So from a pejorative perspective, university life is just kind of a vacation for these kids who have suffered through the hell of getting out of high school and passing their college entrance exams, but it doesn't really prepare them much for the work ahead. So this is a direction to change that, give the universities more money to buy equipment, to create facilities, and to train people in technical and in scientific endeavors. And typically, in Japanese universities, it's pretty low actually. 35% of Japan's graduates are in science and technological exercises or endeavors. So the rest of them are basically in the humanities. And in the United States, that 35% compares to 38%. For South Korea and Germany, it's 42%. And for the United Kingdom, it's 48%. So I think the bureaucrats have taken a look at this and said those countries that are doing better than Japan in terms of high tech and in innovation are, their college graduates are devoting more of their energies to the science and the technical fields. So we need to do that too. So I think this is a way to boost that. And as a consequence, of these universities, 30% of them will actually shift their focus to science and technology as a consequence of this new money that's being invested by the Japanese government. In fact, Fukui Prefecture University will establish, this is interesting, their dinosaur paleontology department, which is the first department of dinosaur paleontology in Japan. You would think, as crazy as the Japanese are for dinosaurs and dinosaur bones, and there are quite a few that are found in Japan. There are a lot of experts on dinosaur paleontology, but this is the first department that will be created for paleontology. So that's a pretty big deal. And the Japanese government is also announcing that the scholarships are available too. So for medium and low income students, scholarships will be available. So it's a real push that's being pursued by the Japanese government, by the Prime Minister. An interesting development, I think people who have been here for a while know of Johnny's Gym Show. Johnny's was famous, or is famous, for providing most of the talent, typically boy talent, boy bands and boy groups, for all of the TV programs and the entertainment industry. Basically, Johnny's Gym Show owned the field, and it came out after, what was it, 19? Let me see. 1987. No, I'm sorry, 2019. That the owner, the creator of Johnny's Gym Show, Johnny Kitagawa, he died in 2019, was a pedophile that preyed on all of the boys that he was recruiting and training. So I don't know if all is an over exaggeration of that, but there are a large number of victims who have complained since he died. He died at 87 years old. The leadership was passed to his sister, and the whole industry is shaking now. And so they're going through a soul searching. They had an investigation that was paid for by Johnny's Gym Show to understand what was the extent of the damage that was caused by Johnny, and also the number of victims. And as they started this investigation, it was supposed to be a private investigation. The reports were not going to be released to the police or to the public. It was just for the Johnny Gym Show's consumption and to revitalize perhaps their policies. That didn't sit well with the victims. They went public. There was a documentary that was created. I think it was produced and aired in the UK. And now it's become a big issue. And the Japanese government, this will shock most of your sensibilities, really didn't do much about it. They kind of swept it under the rug, as they almost never do. So this really got people even more angry that it was being ignored. This is basically, a sex crime that was perpetrated by a Japanese company that was actually so powerfully perceived by NHK, by the television stations, by Japanese government, that he really had a free hand and was never criticized or attacked as a consequence of that. It was all going on behind the scenes, and the exposure that it was gotten, that it did receive, was quelled very quickly. So now with Johnny gone, the skeletons are coming out of the closet, so to speak. And the UN, it's interesting that the United Nations High Commission on Human Rights is sending a working group. They arrived on Friday, a working group on business and human rights to investigate Japan. Is this just shocking? So the United Nations is sending a team to Japan. They'll be here until August 4th. They are having interviews and doing their own investigations in Tokyo. Let me see, they're in Sendai, Osaka, Aichi Prefecture, Hokkaido, Fukushima, and they're holding a news conference on the last day. So they'll have a news conference probably at the Foreign Correspondents Club, and then they'll, I guess, get the hell out of town on that day. But it is a pretty high-level team that is here doing this investigation. It's just and for those of us that have been following Johnny's Gym Show and this kind of sleeping scandal, this is something that's really an eye-opening thing to happen. So you can expect to hear more and more news about this as this team kind of gets the winds in their sails and continues to do their investigation. And then, August 4th, and that will be next week, so we can report on that in our next briefing. Moving on to Mr. Kishida, his popularity has plummeted. It is lower than it's ever been, unfortunately for him. And so that's why he is spending a lot of time in the outlying regions, kissing babies and meeting with his constituents. So this last week, he was on a whirlwind nationwide tour to talk to people about the economy, to talk about his policies, to convince people that he's doing a good job. He really needs to shore that up. Depending on what poll you watch or you follow, Mainichi is going to be the most severe because they're really critical of the government. They post the approval rating of the prime minister at 28%. It hasn't been lower than that, even when the prime minister needed to fire 4 of his cabinet ministers as a consequence of it wasn't wholly as a consequence, but largely as a consequence of what was being revealed about the Unification Church. So his standing is very low. The idea that he might have a snap election is just ridiculous under the circumstances. A shift in or rescheduling or reshuffling of the cabinet obviously is an attractive option for him. But there are other things that are going on that really tell him, hold off. You might want to reconsider your options, and maybe the best thing is to do nothing right now because your numbers are so low. And the reason for his low numbers are, there's a bunch of them. We've talked about them already: the inflation rate, the cost of living, the subsidies being pulled from the energy costs, the population decline, all of these things. The aggressive expansion of military spending and the involvement of the foreign countries in developing Japan's military prowess. But basically, most people boil it down to what the government is doing about the My Number system. So before the Diet closed down this last session, they closed down in July, and then there was talk about maybe there would be a snap election, and there never was. But they closed down at that point of time. They had their 150-day session, and in the closing days of the session, they did pass a law to merge the My Number system with the Japanese health card system. So they are going to be merged, and the law was passed, and it's supposed to go into effect in October of next year. And now, with a couple of the snafus that are being reported, and the investigation of the digital agency and the performance of Kono Taro in a diet session. So they had a special diet session just on Wednesday to discuss this. So it's that big of an issue. Unfortunately, it turns out that Kono Taro apparently didn't do so well. He was a little bit testy, a little bit combative when questioned, but admittedly, the opposition party just wants to embarrass him. So under questioning, he did show a little bit of his irritation. Probably he is being blamed unfairly. Some people are orchestrating that blame being placed on him because he is the most likely top candidate should there be a run for prime minister. That will eventually happen. He will be a contender, no matter what the outcome of the evaluation of the My Number system. But in any event, the My Number system is really starting to cause the prime minister a lot of troubles. I think it's one of those things that if you can find a rock, you pick it up and you throw it at the prime minister. So the opposition party is ready to do that. And I think the My Number system provides that opportunity. I think probably, although they did it through cloak and dagger, is melding these two systems together. It's probably a good idea to digitize the economy and to bring those two systems together under a unified system. But the policy end of that is not really linking up well with the technical end of it, which relies on what the digital agency and Minister Kono Taro are doing with the management of that. So I think he's going to be taking a hit for that. But that's one of the issues that is dragging down the prime minister. The other thing that is causing real concern for him is he has the deputy cabinet secretary is a fellow by the name of Seiji Kihara. What's his last name? Kihara, yes, Seiji Kihara. Good looking, very affable, right arm man of the prime minister. He is in the prime minister's faction. He's been very loyal and a real performer for the prime minister. People call him the shadow prime minister. In fact, I don't know how accurate that is, but he has been really making a lot of progress on behalf of the prime minister. And he was reported to be having an affair. He's married. He was having an affair with a hostess that he met in Ginza. She was not married, divorced. She had a little girl. They were reported to be going to Disneyland by Bunshun. Bunshun is the magazine of choice we talk about almost weekly here. It's a weekly magazine, as you know. Some people call it a scandal rag, but it does provide information that is not being covered by contemporary press. It talks about the things that people don't want to talk about. And basically under the Abe administration, they were restricted from talking about. So that's comfortable for the government, that the press follows the rules and doesn't talk about things that the Japanese government doesn't want them to talk about. Bunshun doesn't pay any attention to that. They make a lot of money on reporting these kinds of things. So this first report, by the way, you never want to be reported on or be investigated by Bunshun, because nobody comes out of that unscathed. They first reported on this Disneyland trip about 6 or 7 weeks ago, and since then the story has just evolved and morphed and transferred. So we talked a little bit in depth. I don't want to go too much into it again today, but it has morphed in. The person that he was, or that he is married to, was not quite divorced when he first started hanging out with her. She has 2 kids. She was estranged from her husband. And in trying to get to his kids and see his kids, they were basically kidnapped by the wife, although that's not the right terminology in this culture, because there's only custody is only recognized by one parent. But I think that issue wasn't resolved yet. He wanted to come and see his children. He brought his father's truck with him, or van. He was going to come by and pick up the kids, and there was an altercation. He was found dead the next day with a stab wound to his throat. The investigation, this is 11 years ago, by the way, the investigation concluded that it was suicide. And it is now coming out that it wasn't suicide, it was murder. And Mr. Kihara is a little bit implicated in that, although the public prosecutor's office, the murder division was, the homicide division was reluctant and restricted from investigating any further because of Mr. Kihara's high position within the government. So there's a lot of just nastiness that's going on there. It makes you scratch your head about how a government is actually run. But anyway, this is another thorn in the prime minister's side. People know about that. People read Bunshun, and even if they don't read Bunshun, this story is going around. It does implicate the prime minister. And over this last week, it is not just the prime minister that is being implicated. The 28% that Mainichi reports as his approval rating is dictated pretty much by the My Number and by what's going on with Kihara. But it implicates also the Liberal Democratic Party. So Mr. Fukuda's, the prime minister, why did it just escape me? Kishida's faction is the 5th largest faction. So he needs to be careful with that. He's got 4 other factions that are bigger than him. They are starting to notice it. People are telling them too, if there was an election today, I don't know if I'd vote for you because I'm not that secure with the LDP. You guys seem to be really mishandling things. And, the prime minister has a son who has a party at the prime minister's residence. And then he's got this, his right-hand man is involved in this murder investigation. And you guys screwed up with the My Number system. I don't know about that. So the entire LDP, of which Mr. Kishida is the president, he's the president of the LDP, is beginning to take a little bit of heat. And I think, we've talked about the necessity for being a reshuffle of the cabinet. This issue with his right-hand man now is burning a hole in him. And he is somewhat restricted from firing him or from moving him because it will be a signal. This will be the 5th critical person in his cabinet, in his circle, that has taken the hit since he's been prime minister. And it hasn't been that long, and no prime minister has survived, even with 4. So Mr. Kishida is doing pretty well with that, but to take another hit, so he wants to hurry this cabinet reshuffle up. It's delicate. It could happen in August. More likely it's going to happen in September. But this issue with Mr. Kihara is really a hot issue. Bunshun, the longest article I have ever read in Bunshun was just this last week, talking about the murder investigation and all of the details that have come out of that. And at the end, Bunshun said, this is not over, we are going to report on it next week. So this will be like the 6th consecutive week that this issue has been showcased in Bunshun. So I don't know if anybody can survive that. It is just so enormous. The other thing that kind of happened of keen interest, the Aso faction is the second largest faction. The Seiwakai, the former Abe faction, is the largest faction with 100 people. And the Aso faction is probably 50, 58 individuals there. The Taro Aso came out just this last week in a speech. He has some speeches all over town. This one was in Yokohama. I didn't attend this one, but I received a report on it, talking about defense spending. And he made an interesting observation about this defense spending to go from 1% to 2%. Mr. Abe couldn't do it, and Mr. Suga couldn't do it. And it was only because of Mr. Kishida and me that we were able to do it. And when we did it, please observe that there were no demonstrations in Nagatacho. So what are you going to say? I mean, this was a huge success for us, this defense spending for military expenditures going from 1%. It's a huge deal. And I think, the Prime Minister and me deserve a lot of credit for that. So keep your eye on that. Mr. Aso is the Deputy Prime Minister right now. He was previously the Deputy Prime Minister and the Finance Minister. He resigned from that post and gave it to Mr. Suzuki, who is in his faction. So the Aso faction still maintains a hold on the finance faction, the finance ministry. And also, I need to point out that Konotaro is also in the Aso faction. And the fact that he is taking a hit because of the My Number system is probably kind of gleeful for Taro Aso. I don't know what his designs are, but it's certainly not that Taro Aso becomes prime minister. I don't think Mr. Taro Aso wants to become prime minister either, but I think he, it's just an interesting development there. So that continues to be curious. We still don't have any real definitive answer on what's going on with Seiwakai, but there has been some developments there. In our last briefing on this issue, you will recall that there was a group of 5. It was determined at the anniversary of the assassination of Mr. Abe, internal to the Seiwakai, that they would have a group of 5 senior leaders kind of running the operation, but there was not everybody actually agreed to that. That kind of tacit agreement broke down very quickly after that. There were some opponents to that. Mr. Mori, who was at one time the leader of the, it used to be called the Mori faction, he also weighed in that it needs to be the group of 5. I'll be in the background, so maybe it gave him more power. And the people who are against him and against the entire group of 5, probably they lack less power under that structure. Oppose that. So now it's a little bit more up in the air. It is now just in a week's time, there are 2 contenders. There's Mr. Hagiuda and there's Mr. Seko, who are vying to take over the top job there. Hagiuda is the policy affairs chief within the LDP. It's probably the second. There are 3 top positions within the LDP structure. There's the chief. The chief of affairs, and then the policy affairs, and then election committee. And Mr. Hagiuda is probably number 2, maybe number 3 within the LDP structure, which is different from the cabinet structure. So he is wielding a lot of weight there. And then there's Mr. Seko, who is in the upper house, and he is the chief of the committee of upper house members inside Seiwakai. And his idea is to form a group under him, obviously, that is just the members of the upper house and maybe some lower house members too, if you like me better than you like Mr. Hagiuda. And then Mr. Hagiuda would take the other component of Seiwakai, and essentially Seiwakai would split up. So that is, I don't know if it's coming to a head right now, but it's still under discussion. And so whenever you see the name of Seko or Mr. Hagiuda, and it's Mr. Hagiuda comes up a couple times in today's briefing, you need to take note of it because there's a lot of jockeying and positioning going on. So keep an eye on that. There will be at some point in time a pretty significant change in Sewakai, particularly as maybe it's triggered by a distribution of cabinet seats. Sewakai maybe won't get their lion's share, and then it makes them take action on that. But more likely as we approach an election time. So there will be watching what's going on in Sewakai is a precursor to what's happening on a general election ground. So we'll take a look at that. Also, just to touch up on the LDP-Komeito relationship, that still is, it's souring a little bit. Mr. Hagiura is actually supposed to be in charge of mending that relationship, but it all broke up because of him. He has a friend he wants to run in a Tokyo district whenever there is an election. And that seat, it's the 30th, it's the 28th seat within Tokyo. Tokyo has 30 lower house seats, and Mr. Hagiura has a friend he wants to run in the 28th, and Komeito said, wait, no, I understand you're the policy affairs chief, and I understand you have a friend in the 28th. The 28th is a newly formed district, by the way, so it's up for grabs, and we, as Komeito, as your coalition partner, we would greatly appreciate you giving that one to us. And Mr. Hagiura said, no, I got a friend that wants to do it. This caused such a schism within the LDP and the Komeito that Komeito basically said, we are not supporting anybody in the 30 races for the LDP. So we don't have a candidate that's going to run in all 30 seats. But for those who are running where we don't have a Komeito candidate, we will tell our voters to vote for the LDP candidate. There are about 11 or 12 LDP members. Without that Komeito vote, they will lose their seat. And in the meantime, Ishin is making great inroads to be a contender for these LDP votes. So Ishin, candidates for Ishin are more similar to the LDP than they are to Komeito, but there are some relationships that still exist there because Komeito helped Ishin win the governor's seat, the mayor's seat, and the majority of seats in the Osaka Prefectural Assembly. So there's a little bit of history there, and it is up for grabs. There are other things that are going on. I hope Gabor is here. Gabor's organization hosted a speech or a presentation, a sit-down briefing with the leader of the Democratic People's Party just this last week, but also with not the Democratic People's Party. I think it was with the Constitutional Democratic Party, and maybe in the Q&A he can add some flavor to that. But also with the Democratic People's Party, which is another opposition party that is pretty close to the LDP. If the LDP was to weave in a couple of opposition parties into their fold, certainly the Democratic People's Party, not the Constitutional Democratic Party, they are really in opposition to the LDP, but maybe Ishin would be contenders to fill in that gap. But in any event, there has been some movement in the Democratic People's Party. It's an important opposition party, and it looks like, let me see, the deputy chief of that party, Maihara Seiji, is going to run against the current leader, Tamaki, in an election for leadership in September 2. So that is right around the corner. This internal fight will kind of get a little bit more heated. The Constitutional Democratic Party has its own issues as well. You've got, Ichiro Ozawa, who is also clamoring for more change there, and for Mr. Izumi to take a more aggressive stance against the prime minister and the ruling LDP. His idea is to coalesce these parties, and with Mr. Maihara, his idea is to form a more coalition type of relationship with Ishin, whereas Mr. Tamaki says, no, we've been affiliated with the LDP. That is our way to go. So there is some internecine warfare that is going on there very quietly under the covers. So there's there's a lot of political movement when the Diet is out of session and people have time to do these machinations. They are doing it in a very big way. Let me see, what else do we have here? I think, Maya, those are my top hits. I'd love to get into Q&A and wrap up this part of the briefing. I think I went a little bit over. Maybe I was a little bit long-winded on some of the issues. So please provide your comments. You know, if there are issues that we're talking about that really interest you, you want us to spend more time on it, just let us know. And if we're going line-winded, I listened to your advice, and hopefully this was a better briefing than it was last week. Thanks, Maya.
Thank you, Timothy, for making it better. We have a couple of comments and questions in Clubhouse, and also I have a couple of questions to you. But let me start with the Clubhouse, okay?
Okay.
I know that you want to hear my questions. I know that.
Oh, so, I'm on the edge of my seat.
I know that. Okay. But yeah, you just bear with me anyway. So good. The first one is from Janusz. Timothy, do you know how many first-generation Japanese are members of the Diet? Like people who were born in Japan to foreign parents. So that is first-generation Japanese.
That's a good question. And I think that there is a, yeah, let me look into that, because there's basically a hierarchy that we could look at. One is, what is the number of hereditary members of the parliament? And I think that's pretty high. I think that might be 20%, maybe even 30%. And the second one is, who are the members of the parliament who have a master's degree overseas and have come back to get into politics? And the third one would be, which one of the members of the parliament have a foreign parent? So I know a lot of the members that satisfy classification 1 and classification 2. And I know quite a few who are married to foreigners, but they're not foreigners. But Janusz's question is, what are the ones that have mixed blood that occupy members of the parliament? The one in Chiba is pretty prominent right now. She won her election in the last by-election. She's part Uyghur, actually. And Uzbeki, I believe. So she comes from a very rich, colorful background, and she is a Ishin candidate, if I believe. Oh, so yeah, a great question. Let me see if I can respond to that. Okay.
Great. Okay, so let's get ready with the answer next time. And then the next one is from Richard. It is a comment. So he says, Richard Walton says, science college major courses are much more expensive. If it is not valued by companies, why pay more? So
that's a great observation. And that is one of the reasons why the Japanese government has decided to devote $2.1 billion to enhancing that, because the science and technology graduates are perceived to be, you know, the rich kids, the spoon in the mouth, the silver spoon in their mouth they were born with. And it's this kind of elite, and they're trying to diminish that so that the costs of entry and the requirements to attend are reduced, because as Richard points out, you know, they're the ones that have all the equipment. They need laboratories, they need all sorts of different things for whatever their field of exploration is, whereas in the humanities it's a little bit less costly. So the ones that have decided in that coursework, typically they spend more. And you know, 111 universities, that's a pretty big deal. So I think you will see an impact on this, not right away, but probably in the next 10 years, definitely there should be an outgrowth of this investment.
Right, great. And then the next one is from, okay, so this is the next comments are about the My Number card, and they come from Mario and Richard once again. So Mario's comment is, although the number of My Number terminals is usually small, some hospitals require you to check in at least or at each visit, whereas it is sufficient to show your insurance card once a month So many problems to be solved besides privacy issues. So obviously it's privacy issues plus a lot of other logistics and well, let's say user interface and user experience, if we can use modern marketing terms. But yeah.
Okay, let me veer off of that one just a little bit slightly. If you are Fujitsu, you won this contract when it was first put out for bidding 10 years ago, and you are producing these card readers. You're very happy because all of the clinics, all of the hospitals, all of the dentists, everybody needs to have one of these card readers. So one of the problems is that the card readers have not been effectively deployed, and so a lot of this is done by hand. So that's one of the issues. But yeah, it's a huge market development initiative to have Fujitsu with the My Number system. And by the way, in Japanese, if you're talking to your friends about it, it's called Maina. Maina.
Maina.
Maina. That's
Well,
the Japanese love this 3-syllable for just about everything. And for the My Number system, it's called Maina. And it's almost become a pejorative when people mention Maina in a conversation. It's almost always with a critical comment that follows it. So, but if you're Fujitsu, you're loving it, I guess.
Well, if you're in everybody's mind, then why not?
Oh, by the way, while we're on the Maina topic, so an independent third-party investigation went and investigated the digital agency, and they conducted an interview and an investigation. They also did the same thing with Fujitsu, and they are going to report formally their findings in August. And the Prime Minister is reluctant to do anything until this report is published. But Kono Taro was in the hot seat just on Wednesday. They had this special session just for discussing Maina. He was on the hot seat. He was just being blistered by the opposition. And one of the critics was saying, look, when the investigation was there at the digital agency, you weren't even there. You were traveling someplace. You were in Europe or Saudi Arabia or something like that. And, what the hell is with that? So the minister said, I'm the minister of the digital agency. I've got lots of things going on. This is just one of those things. I'm sorry I couldn't be there when the investigators came in, but my trip to the United States, there are a lot of people in the United States at this particular period of time since the diet finished and the new diet or the supplementary diet might start in September. Everybody's on these international trips. I canceled that one to come and deal with this one. So, back off, but they didn't back off. And he was a little bit haughty, I guess, interpreted as haughty by the critics. So I think a little bit of shine was taken off of him. Everybody loves to be critical, but he's taken an unfair hit in my view.
Right. Well, we'll continue with him a little bit later. Before that, another comment from Richard. I know many people, especially older people, who have not and will not sign up for My Number card until they are forced to do so.
Yeah.
There are high levels of distrust still.
Yeah, those are two different issues. The reason why the older people are not going to sign up for it is because you can sign up for it on your phone or on your computer. And the old people are saying, what are you talking about? I don't have a computer, right? So it's technically difficult. They can do it if they go to the ward office or to the Kuyakusho. And the system, I don't know if you've been through the ward office, but the system is relatively easy to sign up for. And in fact, the Japanese government, they were on a campaign. I don't know if it's in effect now. They will give you some money. I think it's Nimaen for signing up. Sign up for My Number and you get some credits, and you can use those credits to offset some of your costs. So they're really pushing it hard.
They are pushing it hard, but at the same time, they require everybody to go at least twice, to the Kuyakusho. Yes, at least twice. And then in this heat, my mother-in-law, she went there, and it was, well, I can tell you that it wasn't easy for her in the heat. That's what I mean. Oh, even though the procedure is not difficult, as you say, so the logistics of applying first and then waiting for the card to be issued and then going to receive it, I think it's quite a lot especially for the elderly here.
Listen, Maya, I'm not saying anything that you haven't experienced yourself. Any trip, any interaction that I have with the Japanese government at the local level always requires, it's never successful the first time. You know,
Mm,
you need another document, you forgot something, always, it always requires 2 or 3 trips. It's always a frustrating exercise, but that's the way it is. I mean, it's not always a successful experience. So.
right. Okay. So let me continue then with the next question here. And we have a question from Ocean in LinkedIn, on LinkedIn, sorry. So Ocean, please give me a bit of time first, and then I'll go to your question as well. So the next one here in Clubhouse is when Japanese police will stop racial
Never.
profiling and stopping foreigners in the street and asking them silly questions.
Yeah, it
Mm,
happens. So part of this is it's kind of racial profiling. You're right, but it's also training. So frequently, what happens here, and so I went to law school here, as you know, and in my graduating class, it's the graduate class. So it's not like the undergraduate class of law. So in Japanese universities, they have undergraduate class of law. It doesn't mean that you pass through the undergraduate course and you can become a lawyer. In fact, you can go to the graduate school and you still can't become a lawyer. Right now, it qualifies you to take the test, but comparatively, the graduate classes are very small. So in my graduating class, I had maybe 30 members in my graduating class from law school, and about 20 of them went to the police department. So it is a place where people will go. They might do their time. It's kind of like joining the army. You go in for a couple of years, you join the police, you get trained, you have experience, and then you move into the bureaucracy, not in the police force, but maybe in one of the ministries. But it's a good stepping stone for people. And I think for what's happening with picking out foreigners is it's kind of practice for these new guys for experience on how you deal with the foreigners, but it's practice for dealing with the Japanese too. And sometimes the foreigners are a little bit more difficult, but they're not as risky as dealing with the Japanese if you make a mistake or you kind of over exceed your discretion or your bounds. But dealing with the Japanese police, it's a number one, you just never want to be involved with them. You don't, if there's an opportunity not to be involved, you don't want to, even if it means that you kind of escape from being interrogated. But yeah, it's like an endless process, and it's almost feels like a harassment. And let me see what's in your bags and stuff like that. So the protections that many people have in other countries from police intrusion is not so much practiced here. So that's another one of those cultural things. So it does generate a lot of friction, but I think the Japanese really try hard not to be perceived as being racist, although there are some, especially the older guys, they have that proclivity. But I think it's I don't ascribe it to being racist per se, but even saying that, on a global scale, when they do these international comparisons, Japan does, Japan is insular society. There are a few foreigners who live in the country. There's the level of interaction is very low, so there are some frictions that are caused. I'm sure everybody that's in this briefing has experienced it to one degree or another, but it will continue. It's not going to end. They're not going to get softer on it, I don't think.
well, hopefully they will, but yeah, we don't know. So, okay, thanks for the answer. And now LinkedIn. Ocean, thank you for your question. It's about the Bank of Japan, Timothy. And the question is there a correlation between the Fed raising the interest rate by a quarter point last Wednesday in the US and the Bank of Japan's rate increase on Friday?
I don't know if it's a correlation, Ocean, but I think that there is a connection there. The Fed and the European banking system has been pushing Japan. Actually, they've been on a more aggressive monetary role than the Japanese. The Japanese are an outlier, as we all know. They want to make money easier. They want to keep the interest rate very, very low, near zero. And the trade in Japanese yen, the foreign investment that's flowing into Japan, there's a huge deal going on there. All depends on what the yield ratio is for the yield curve that is decided by the Bank of Japan. And I think with Mr. Ueda, he's different from Mr. Kuroda. He needs to establish his own way forward. Mr. Kuroda established 2%, and I'm going to stick to it, and I'm going to bring Japan out of the doldrums, and we're going to have this bubble economy again. Well, he was never successful in doing that, and Mr. Ueda is trying to carve a new way forward. He's getting pressure from the Bank of Japan, from the Fed, and from the European Bank. Be a little bit more aggressive, but Japan has got to carve its own way forward. The Japanese yen was at around 140 this time last in June, and it has come down. It is about 132 today. So there has been an impact. Every time the number goes down, the value of the Japanese yen is higher. It's more closer to parity at 1-on-1. And the target has historically been around 110 yen to the dollar, is a place where the Japanese are making money. The economy is taking off. They're not really able to get there, and hovering around 140 yen to the dollar really incites the Japanese government to get involved and to do some aggressive investing in the Japanese yen. So the other thing that is coming out of this, I think not a lot of people are following the bond market, but there are yen-denominated bonds in other countries. So the South Korean Airlines has a yen-denominated bond that they sell, and not only South Koreans, but Japanese can purchase this. And this yen-denominated bond market is taking off. That's what got Berkshire Hathaway so engaged here. That the market for bonds, the long-term 10-year bond rate for these commercial paper is very attractive, even though the Japanese government is trying to keep a artificial tap on how much yield the bond market will produce for the Japanese bonds. So as most people know, the Japanese government owns more than 50% of the bonds that are issued in Japan, and the value of those, how much they produce in terms of revenue in a 10-year period, is dictated by this number that Mr. Kuroda and Mr. Ueda have been toying with. And it also impacts what the value of the yen is going to be. So it remains to be seen. This is Mr. Kuroda's first kind of real aggressive move. It's, like you point out, Ocean, a 0.5% increase. And that means it's an increase plus or minus. So it goes both ways. And he said in his press release on Friday, they had a big press conference there, that the key feature of his policy now is to be flexible. So it's not a hard line as it was under Mr. Kuroda. It's going to be flexible. So depending on the circumstances, the Bank of Japan might move a little bit more aggressively. It's we need to see that. But yes, the Fed moved their interest rates too, and they have said, be prepared because we're going to do it again. So the currency market globally is just in incredible flux. Japan is trying to carve their own way forward. Sometimes that's worked out for them in the past. Sometimes they've been caught with their pants down, figuratively.
Right. Yeah. I don't know, but I have this, anticipation that they will continue. Actually, the Bank of Japan, Mr. Ueda, will continue, doing that. Maybe not this year, but next year, once again, there will be, a small step forward, and then the next one and the next one. So they have just begun. But
yeah, I don't know, Maya, because what's going on in the currency market now is so vast and so huge. So the petrodollar is being replaced by China and Russia in collusion with Saudi Arabia. So it might not be that the United States has this corner on the market that they get a huge benefit from. And if the piper, if the music stopped playing and the United States had to really pony up, their dollar is not bound by a gold reserve. It is bound by fractional reserves. And that means that the value is based on people's belief in the value. It's not based on a currency dominated or underpinned by even a bucket of commodities like many currencies are. So if the petroleum is removed from that combination and the dollar is not dominated by the value or the trade in petroleum throughout the world, there's a lot of hell to pay for that, and that could potentially happen.
Yes, it can happen indeed. Okay, so we are moving forward with the next one. So yes, Eleanor, she shared with us that the white paper on the defense policy has been issued. It was issued actually last Friday.
That's right.
Yes, so I'm sure that there are quite a few details there about the way forward, of course, and what has been happening. Maybe we can talk about this a little bit later. So the link to the white paper is in the comment section, the room chat of Clubhouse. So to everybody who is interested, please feel free to click on that link and go there. I'm sure that you will be able to also download the document and study it better.
I'm sorry, which Eleanor is this?
Eleanor Shiori Hughes.
Okay, thank you very much, Eleanor. Thanks for joining us. Did Eleanor join us for the Hibiya party?
No, she's in Washington, I believe.
Oh, right, she's the Georgetown grad.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Hi, Eleanor. So the Japanese government produced 3 defense papers in December of last year. The National Strategic Strategy document, plus 2 supplemental documents. And this new document that was released on Friday that Eleanor's talking about is the first kind of embellishment or update on that. And it still identifies China as the word that they say is the toughest challenge of the post-war period, entering into this new age. That's what the defense minister Hamada said on Friday. So this is a big deal, and he's in acknowledgement of a global shift in the balance of power, and that Japan needs to accommodate that. And the competition between China and the United States in particular is intensifying in various fields, and Japan is a central part of that, he also said. So this is the first white paper released since December, and Hamada, the defense minister, Hamada, stated that Japan will, this is pretty important language. He said, "We will drastically reinforce our defense capabilities in the near future, and Tokyo is now more ready than ever to shed some of the post-war constraints upon us militarily." That's huge. That is really huge. So one of the concerns for people who love the post-war Japan and the peace constitution is that somehow Japan will be pulled into some controversy and they will reject Article 9 and they will become a military power again. And I think that is inevitable. All of the things we've talked about today point to that direction, that Japan wants to create a military industrial complex. They want to begin to export offensive and defensive military technology. Right now, they've made an agreement with Komeito to be a little bit soft on the interpretation so that Japan can begin to develop this defense industry. So these components that are offensive in nature, we will agree that we can manufacture those and export those as long as they're in pieces. They're not the finished product. So there is this incremental change. The LDP needs to accommodate Komeito because of the coalition partnership. But let's say that this partnership falls apart in this next election, because of Komeito they lose the majority of seats in Tokyo, and then the LDP is angry, and then Ishin is coming up, and a different coalition partner comes up that is more accommodating to an Article 9, and then one of the rockets from North Korea falls within Japan's economic zone, exclusive economic zone. The whole thing can change. And just by the way, I forgot to mention that the defense minister also said at the firing of these two rockets at midnight last Monday, they were ready to shoot them down had they crossed over some kind of red line that they've defined in the sky. So this is a new strategy of Japan. I think it's not just Japan. I think it's also in concert with the United States in terms of capabilities, but also involving South Korea too in terms of sharing the telemetry. That's not right. Telemetry.
Telemetry.
Yes. And figuring that, but shooting something out of the sky that is being fired, that is a huge escalation. And I think, within the year, there will be something that comes up that drastically impacts the review of the constitutional restrictions on defense capabilities. Thanks for the question, though, Eleanor.
Yeah, thank you. And I believe that there was some news about the vehicles that the Japanese government is going to donate to Ukraine. They are already equipped with offensive weapons. And the trade-off there was that those weapons actually, since they are, attached to vehicles, that are supposed to, I don't know what the wording was there. I don't remember it, but so the point was that they could actually, those weapons would be exported together with the vehicles, which I think that it's really another step forward into that direction. For good or for bad, I'm one of the people who is not very happy with these developments, but we'll see what happens. Right. Okay, Timothy, and I have one more question to you. So going back to Kono Taro, I know,
Yes.
I'm sorry. Okay, stay with us, please. So going back to Kono Taro and the reshuffle, the possible reshuffle. So we know now that the reshuffle is not coming immediately, not at least until, I don't know, until September maybe, or even later.
We don't know that. So the key issue there is what's going on with Kihara. And Bunshun said that please stand by, we're going to issue another report. And the prime minister really doesn't want to let go of him in a public way. He wants to conceal it by reshuffling the cabinet. And by the way, these other committee posts are going to be shifted too. And Kihara, that was just consequential, right? Mm-hmm. So he does want to do it. If he does a one-off and he fires Kihara, then the knives are going to come out. I mean, just look at Kono Taro, how much opposition attack he received just because of my number. And it wasn't really his fault, but it's on his watch. So with Kihara being, forcibly removed from his position as a consequence of a murder investigation, it's a different deal, and the opposition will just be in arms about that. They will have lots of ammunition. So it could be that his hand is forced. It could be in August sometime.
Right. So, going on, and then the question I have for you is that, you told us that probably Kono Taro is going to be removed from the ministerial post, the position there in the digital agency. But at the same time, if he is removed from that position, he will probably become a valid contender for the prime minister's post. So do you think that it is going to maybe influence PM Kishida's decision about Kono Taro's next appointment?
Dealing with Kono Taro is a difficult one. He's already been defense minister. He's already been METI minister, consumer affairs minister. He's had three ministerial portfolios. He is qualified to become prime minister. He hasn't been finance minister. Maybe that's a place where he will be parked. But it would look a little bit like a reward, even though he was embroiled in the Maina controversy. So I think, yeah, the prime minister is in a tough position, not only with regard to what he does with Kono Taro, but also what he does with the Secretary General of the LDP, who he wants desperately to move aside. But that individual also has been METI minister. He's been a foreign minister. He's got a couple of portfolios already under his belt. After this policy post within the LDP, he's the number one contender to become prime minister. He's got some issues, though. Not everybody in his own faction likes him. He's got opposition even within his own party. So those are two that are ripe for adjustment. Probably Hagiuda also will leave his policy post and come into the government at a very high level, I would imagine. He's going to make his bid for prime minister within the next two elections, I've got to imagine. But I think, what to do with, he could just leave him where he is. But once again, we've talked about this before, there is a circulation that needs to go on. And the more people you keep in these cabinet positions, it prevents other people who deserve one of those seats to be inserted in. And everybody gets a turn. If you've survived 5 elections, maybe 6, definitely. If you've been in the parliament that long and survived that long, you are dedicated to have a ministerial portfolio, because now you'll always, it's like being the Pope. Until you die, you're always called Your Excellency, the Pope, or an ambassador. You're always Your Excellency. For the cabinet ministers, until you die, you are always called minister. So that's great when you're campaigning, when you're writing letters, when you're promoting yourself, you're always being called minister. So what to do with these big shots who have these positions and it's time for them to matriculate up? Where do you matriculate them to? So it just occurred to me that Kono Taro, being from the Aso faction, maybe they could kick him up to foreign minister. I think that would be terrific. I don't think his relationship with Aso Taro is good enough for him to do that. Right now, the current foreign minister is Mr. Suzuki, who is the son of the former Prime Minister Suzuki. So, yeah, it's a different difficult calculus. And when it comes out, and they stand on that staircase and get their pictures taken, that will be a huge deal in Japanese politics. We will report heavily on that.
Great. Thank you for that. And we have Yuka with us on stage. Yuka, hello, and thank you for coming up.
You said that was the last question.
Yeah. I'm sorry. I'm always looking at the last minute. So sorry about that.
No, that was my last question, not everybody else's. Okay.
Okay. The Timothy, you always have a very, the boatload of interesting stats. But today, one sort of stood out for me, which was, you said, 10 out of 100, 1 out of 10 people are foreigners in Japan, right? And I thought it was kind of intuitive. You just mentioned, Japan is the very insular society, and then I thought, the Japanese immigration policy is notoriously a strict or unfriendly. So my question to you, again, it may not be a fair question. So please share your insight if you are aware. What is a typical means of entry to Japan? Like yourself, do those people get a scholarship?
Oh, that's a great question.
How do they come?
That's a great question. And let me, I've written this down because I took it down from documents as I was preparing for my briefing. 10.7% sounds too high as a population for foreigners in Japan. Now that you mention it, it has always been my firm understanding that the number of foreigners in Japan is a little bit less than 2%. And that seems reasonable to me, that the vast majority of people that live in Japan are Japanese nationals. And the number of foreigners here is very low. It used to be around 1%, but it has increased. And a lot of these are they've discontinued the foreign worker visa program, if you might remember that, where they brought in semi-skilled or unskilled people from Southeast Asia. India, from Thailand, from Vietnam, to come to Japan to do manual labor and that sort of thing. The visa lasted for 4 years. You couldn't bring your family, but you could be under a visa program. It didn't go very well, but a lot of people came in and they matriculated from that. They didn't go back to their country. There's also a huge number of Chinese and Vietnamese women who have been married to Japanese men. And that occurs typically in the rural areas where the women, as soon as they get old enough to finish high school or Tandai, or maybe even, probably not even university, they would leave their prefecture and go someplace else for the university, and they never go back to their home. They stay in the big cities. So this vacuum effect of the big cities, Fukuoka, Tokyo, Osaka, Kyoto, bringing in these kids into the central areas. I mean, 10% of the Japanese population resides in Tokyo. So that's a big magnet there. So I think for a lot of the people, they can't find wives, so they import them. So that's one component there. But I think a lot of them, as the details report, most of them are from China, South Korea, and from, what was the third one? Vietnam. So these are people who are, and the economy in Vietnam is really exploding. And Vietnam has an incredibly low aged population. So it's a very vibrant community. And I think people just want to experience and get out of their country and try and experiment with other things. It used to be that would happen a lot with the Filipinos. The Filipinos would travel and be nurses and laborers throughout the world. They were famous for that. But here in Japan, I think it's mostly a large percentage of that is due to marriage. Not so much of that is due to the education programs, because most of the education programs, in order to actually enter the university system, you do need a little bit of a help, either from your government or from the Japanese government, to matriculate in. You need a place to stay, you need sponsorship, you need a visa, a student visa, that sort of thing. So you need a little bit of a leg up. So it's mostly, I think, the worker program, marriage, and just finding Japanese companies to hire you from overseas, and you'd come in and supply them with whatever skill that it is that you have. The other thing that's kind of interesting is we have the expo, the Osaka Expo, that's supposed to open up in October of 2025. They're having a hell of a time. No foreign country has submitted plans to build a pavilion. And there's supposed to be, maybe 400 different pavilions there. About 11 of them are supposed to be big ones sponsored by major countries to showcase their wares. And nobody has submitted a bid for building a pavilion in Yume-no-shima. This is important because Yume-no-shima, after the expo, then they're going to build the first casino in Japan. You know that the license has been opened for that, and this will be the site next door for the first casino. So the amount of construction and money that is going to be generated there, first as a component of building the expo, and secondly as a component of building this massive casino complex. The number of workers that are competent to do that, more than 20% of the Japanese laborers, this is talking about in Osaka, that are available there, more than 20% of the laborers are over 60 years old. And the number of younger, like under 30, is about 12%. So the number of people who are going into the construction industry is very small. And it's just like a inverse pyramid, where the older ones who are doing the construction, pouring the concrete, bending the steel, it's a huge issue. It was reported today just about the truck drivers, the lack of truck drivers that the country is experiencing now. So this idea, I forgive me for saying 10%. It's definitely not 10%, but it's more likely. It's more than 2% right now, but that number has definitely got to increase, because people aren't going to have children in enough velocity to deal with this need that the government has right now.
Because 10% may be driven by maybe the different denominator, maybe I don't know it may not be, divided by the entire population. It's I don't know, because that's
It could
interesting.
it could be births. It could be births.
Right. Okay. Yeah. By the way, could you maybe for the next week or even later, I'm really interested in this casino issue because the people that I talk with, they're very anti-gambling, and the U.S. we have an Indian gaming, and then that's controversial, but it's also generated a lot of revenues. So I think interesting topic. So it's maybe in the future. Thank you.
No, it's a great topic. It is epical that it is happening. I mean, it's taken 15 years for them to pass that legislation. And that legislation, by the way, is legislation that was created and promoted to the Diet through the Abe faction. So this was a pet project by Mr. Abe, by the Abe faction, to develop gambling and casinos in Japan to spark, a revitalization of the economy and also to kick up, the entertainment industry. So the entertainment industry here, we were talking about Johnny's Gym Show. It's a huge component of the overall economy. It doesn't export very well. Manga does really well. France is the second highest importer of Japanese manga, interestingly enough. But the entertainment, it doesn't travel too well. The movie industry, the music industry is not that great. K-pop is just killing it internationally. But it was Mr. Abe's dream, and probably through Seiwakai, to develop more of this international attractiveness of Japan as an employment hub, as an entertainment hub. So the casinos are supposed to do that. They're going to take entertainment to the next level, because less than 2% of the entire complex is devoted to gambling. The rest of it is devoted to, wedding halls and resort and hotels and, other kind of facilities there. And the casino is just a very tiny component of it. But it is very controversial, as you say.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much. Thanks for the question. And I'll look into it and maybe delve into it next week.
Well, great. Yes. So thank you. Yuka, thank you for coming up. Thank you for the question. And let me have a look at yes. So we have a couple of questions in Clubhouse again. Well, submitted. And then from Gabor and Hiroko. So Gabor says, it's not just that people don't have enough children. Jobs like construction or being a truck driver is not an attractive job for Japanese young, and it is understandable. And then Hiroko says, Singapore has experienced many people being addicted to gambling. Also, these are two different topics. Okay, Timothy, apologies for mixing them up. So the first one, yes, about the population decline and the number of foreigners. I believe that, yes, Gabor is actually saying that oh, sorry, I just mixed up. Okay, yeah, people don't have enough children here, and a lot of the jobs, like menial labor and so on, they're just not attractive for the local people. And yes, and all right. Then the next we go with Hiroko. So this is about the Yuka, also probably in relation to your question about the casinos and the controversy here. So Hiroko says, Singapore has experienced many people being addicted to gambling. We can learn from them. They have some programs to help people rehabilitate. And then going down. Yes. Oh, this is okay, Gabor, once again, there is fundamental difference between J-pop and K-pop. Gabor, I believe you're talking about the entertainment. Okay, so K-pop is made for export to take over the world, while J-pop never had such ambitions, primarily made for domestic market. Yes, and we go down, then David. I can't imagine a more attractive job driving the length and breadth of Japan and listening to podcasts and Clubhouse while you drive? Well, thank you, David, for validation. Okay, thanks for that. And then, great. Okay, Christopher, you're a big J-pop fan and you're a foreigner. I see the point. Yes. So, well, I guess that there are foreigners who do believe and who like J-pop, but compared to the number of people who like K-pop, probably, this number is really, really small. And then Gabor, once again, the whole anti-gambling and casino movement is very populist. Japan is losing a lot of money when a Japanese citizen can just easily play online and they can't stop it. True, that's true again. And then, okay, Christopher David is really the standard we need to aspire for. Thank you for that. Yes, and then for Tim, I agree with David that I'd much rather drive a truck than sit in a cubicle. Well, okay, so a lot of things here, a lot of comments. Thank you for leaving them and letting us read them in the air. Okay.
Let me make a comment, if you don't mind, about the truck drivers. Isn't that funny that we hit a chord with the truck drivers? So at a technical level, you would think that Japan would be at the forefront, and it probably is, of autonomous driving. The vehicle can drive itself. Except on the regulatory level, the Japanese government cannot pass this through legislation this decade. But I think what's going to happen, it's like Gaiatsu, that the situation dictates that they don't have enough drivers for the trucks, but the trucks are the best way to get products into and out of the populated areas from where they're produced to where they're consumed. And I think that this is going to be the trigger for autonomous driving trucks. That's where it's going to first start. We already have autonomous driving, for example, the monorail. For some trains, they're beginning to experiment a little bit with that, and the driver just sits there, and he can't smoke a cigarette, but he sits there, and he's on call, but it's basically autonomous, and that will move later to trucks, then buses, and I think that's going to happen relatively quickly because, like you said, I think it was David who might have said it, is that the number of people who want to do that work is diminishing, and they're usually the older guys, and they're not going to be around to change the tires or to sit in traffic or to drive their loads in the middle of the night. So if anybody in the audience is a driver, you notice that when you're coming home late at night, the roads are just packed. The Tokyo roads, at least, are packed with these trucks that are delivering product into the city, and they use the nighttime hours when traffic is low to do that. So I think autonomous vehicle driving is quickly going to come. And it's like with a lot of things in Japan, that it's just irritatingly slow, and then all of a sudden you wake up and it's almost there. It's almost implemented before your very eyes. So I anticipate that something like that will happen because the need is there.
But I also wonder, I think that I have heard probably from you, Timothy, that, Tokyo and other big cities in Japan have already been mapped for drone routes,
Yes.
right? Drone deliveries. So maybe we'll see some development into that direction as well when
Definitely.
it comes to delivery and supply. Of course, the future is exciting, actually. So we'll see. And I'm sure that you will be reporting on that as well.
Absolutely.
Yes. Okay. And then there is one more question from Tim. Do elderly Japanese really speak in a U.S. Southern? No, that's a different one. Okay, that's a comment which is in response to Christopher's comment, I think. Yes, touche. Yes. Okay. So I'll leave it to the people in Clubhouse to enjoy the conversation there. It's really fun. If you're curious, you can always go to this recording in Clubhouse and check the room chat because everything is left there.
So the funny thing here, Maya, is that I'm just on my camera here. I don't see any of the comments that are being fed in. You're seeing them. You're laughing to yourself. You're commenting. I don't know what in the hell you're talking about. But yes, thank you for filling me in from time to time.
Just from time to time, yes, because otherwise it's just too, All right, and we have okay, it is a question maybe from or a comment from Ocean on LinkedIn. So it is Expo 2025 organizers are looking to sell 7 million advanced tickets to businesses in order to cover surging costs and ensure the stable operation of the event. So strange to hear that no outside countries have submitted bids to the Osaka municipal government to build their pavilions yet.
Yeah. So tickets go on sale in November. 7,500 yen, I think, per person. That's 500 days before the opening of the expo. So they've already decided the day that tickets will go on sale. And the idea about, or the comment, the observation that isn't it regrettable that these countries who usually participate in these international expos, I mean, these expos, what a great idea, what a great infusion to the economy when they do that. And this Yume no Shima is an artificial island, so they've been building it for years. They've been letting the land settle down. They're beginning to build structures on it. And one of the first big projects is the expo. And then the next one is going to be the casino. So it's exploitation of man-made islands that you can see from satellites throughout Japan. So the point here is that building the expo and not having the people come in, there's a couple of things going on here. One is the last expo that they had in 2020, I believe it was delayed because of COVID, and so the time between now of the 4-year time gap, it's a little bit less. So people might be exhausted. We already had an expo. It was just 2 years ago. We got to do another one. Maybe that's part of it. But the other part of it is that I think people are concerned about the cost that is being extracted in Japan. So Universal Studios had a hell of a time building Universal Studios. This was a long time ago. But the level of corruption and the amount of construction costs that were kind of in that very questionable area of the Japanese economy, and that component happens to be heavily weighted in the Osaka region. So there's a little bit of that going on. But certainly the Japanese central government is, Ishin is powerful in Osaka. They've got the governor, they've got the mayor, they've got the majority of the prefectural seats there. So they're on a roll there. And for them to not be able to pull off the expo is a bit of a black eye. It causes a little bit of concern. The governor actually asked the prime minister, can we, this law that's going in that restricts the number of hours that laborers can work, it's going to hurt us because now they can't work 720 hours of overtime a year. We'd like to have a relaxation of that so that they can work even more overtime. We'll pay them, of course, for that. They'll get more money for it. They will charge these countries that are building these pavilions more money. But there needs to be a little give and take here. So Ishin, you need to be a little bit more cooperative with us, and we'll make sure that this expo goes off smoothly. And you can start accepting. So there's a lot of that going on too. So it's not just in isolation. There's a lot going on in the background.
Wow, thank you for that. We also get Gabor. Gabor is with us on stage in Clubhouse. Gabor, good morning.
How are you, Gabor?
Good morning. Good morning.
So, Gabor, were you here at the beginning of the briefing?
Yes. I heard you mentioning our event with
Kenta Izumi, right?
Yeah,
so
which is good. I haven't met him before, and it was very interesting. Yeah, it's one thing to read about somebody or watch him on TV and actually match him in person, and I had a great impression. He looks like
very polished,
intelligent, and good. He's got a good charisma. So
yes,
I didn't really know who he was before he took over this daunting task to fill in the shoes of Adano.
Yeah.
Because because the Constitutional Democratic Party was one of the many successor of the old DPJ and was formed in 2017 when Koike came and made a mess with the Kibonoto. And so it was a pet project of Adano, a former chief cabinet secretary, very, very talented, very charismatic, energetic politician. And it was Adano's party until the failure at the election. So Izumi took over, and he's only the second president of the party. And it looks like a pretty impossible job to fill in the shoes for Adano. But he said very interesting things. One was he flagged that the problem with the CDP was that it went too far left and failed to address the people, voters in the center. And that was one of the reasons behind the failure at the latest election. And he used this comparison that the CDP become too much Bernie Sanders and like to have become more like a Biden, but in a younger version. But it's a good comparison because if they can't address the center, there's no way of being successful. And yeah, very interesting what he said about Ishin. It says it's like having another LDP out there and fighting with them. And he said he expects election this year, but obviously he says they don't know, and they always have to be prepared at the disadvantage of the of the opposition, and he really, it's obvious to you, but he praised the LDP. It's such a strong institution, can address quickly and flexibly any crisis, any challenge by making changes within the party and reorganize themselves and stand again
and steal other people's good ideas.
Yeah.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah.
Yes.
So that's what his mission is, to drag the CDP back towards more the center. Otherwise, they will have no chance. That was the gist of his message. And on autonomous driving, it's since April, level 4 is allowed by law. So without any human driver in the vehicle. And the Japanese government, in words, is very ambitious. In the Honabuto, last time they wrote about robot taxis and autonomous services in 100 places in Japan by I don't know which year. But they understand that one big factor behind autonomous driving is the declining population, and you have less and less people to drive cars and trucks, and it's very difficult to drive to find truck drivers to replace them. And you see, if you take a taxi in Tokyo, you see average the taxi driver you find is probably between 65 and 90.
Yep.
So and they driverless truck services has been launched as a test on the Shin-Tomei Expressway. This parallel with Tomei, and nobody really uses, so it can safely drive between Nagoya and Tokyo. So driverless fleet of trucks started driving. It's a very fascinating thing, and this is the future, and it's really with us. And I understand the Japanese government, the Japanese people. If you have less and less Japanese people, and you train them, and you school them, you don't really want them to be truck drivers, right? And on the other hand, young Japanese people, it's not a really attractive job to become a truck driver.
Right.
Sorry for speaking too much.
No, that's great.
it's
The only other thing that the Japanese government is working against is this apparent zero tolerance for mistake or for accident. And we see this with the Mina system, where Konotaro he's fighting because there has been, it's not a huge number of mistakes, but there's just seems to be a zero tolerance for that. And if there is an accident that causes death, for example, with autonomous vehicles, you can anticipate that it's going to be just a total shutdown. All the machinery, all of the investment will just go to hell. So I think that there's got to be some flexibility exercise there too. But yeah, great topic for further discussion. Thank you for your input, Gabor.
Thank you, Gabor.
Thank you.
And then there is a question, Timothy, about about the expo in Osaka. So Gerard is asking, where do you get your information from? Because I guess that it is probably a kind of shocking for people that no country has yet submitted documents to start building pavilions there. Because yes, Gerard, I don't know whether you have seen this, but yes, we know that 153 countries have actually confirmed that they will participate. But
they will participate. They're not going to build a pavilion, though.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yes. So,
yeah.
Yeah. So anyway, the question to you, Timothy, is where do you get the information? And
thank you for the question. But for those people who are long-term listeners, they all know that I just make it up as I go along. So
right.
But as you know, this is what I do for a living. I'm involved in Japanese policy and Japanese politics, and almost not quite on a daily basis, but throughout the week, I will be receiving or joining in a briefing at a very high level with policymakers, with bureaucrats. From time to time, I share those pictures with you, Maya, about this is what they're serving for breakfast or for the lunch briefing, because it's a way to generate political funds that is legal. You join a briefing or you join a Benkyokai, and when they have a briefing, you pay like nimayen, 20,000 yen, and it's kind of as a fee for a briefing that you receive, but also they kind of go a little bit overboard and present a nice lunch for you. So I get those, multiple times throughout the week. It's almost as if I've been on a continuing PhD course for the entire time I've been doing this business here, and I've been doing it for a long time. So that's kind of how I get the information. And when Maya and I started this, just for a little bit of background for you, when Maya and I first started this briefing, we decided that it would be a different take from Tokyo on Fire. So most of you know about Tokyo on Fire. There are more than 400 videos on YouTube under that title, where every week I pumped out at least one video on YouTube about Japanese politics, about diplomacy, about a lot of different things. And I did that for about 3 years and got tired of it because it just consumed so much of my time. And the agreement with Maya was I will be consistent on Sundays to do this briefing, but it can't be a lot of heavy lifting for me. So I don't have the green screen. I don't have people putting on makeup. I have to do that myself. Maya shouts at me and tells me to change my shirt. Why don't you shave? Why don't you comb your hair before you do your briefing? So over time, it has improved. But the whole point here is that it's not supposed to, I'm not supposed to dedicate my time in preparing for the room. So I apologize that some of the details are not so crisp. Maybe my diction and my speaking, sometimes I forget the Prime Minister's name. It's not as polished, but it is raw. It is real. It's hopefully relevant. And it's something that I can continue to provide on a weekly basis for you. And if there was some money involved, if like we charged for this and I was getting paid for it, it would enhance it incredibly, I'm sure. But it is just we do it because the audience wants it, and so that's where my details and my information comes from. I hope it's as accurate as possible. throughout time, Maya has said you need to provide more numbers. You need to be more specific with the statistics, which we have increased a lot. And so thank you. Who was it? Yuka that pointed it out. Thank you for the statistics. And so we continue to attempt to improve this, and it really depends on your input and your advice to us. So thank you for that. And before we sign off, and I know Maya, you've got some other things to say and probably another 6 or 7 questions. God damn it. But please hit like, subscribe, provide some comments, because that's the way that things are proliferated in the digital sphere that we occupy right now. I don't get paid for this. Maya doesn't get paid for this. It is a contribution to the exchange of information, and hopefully getting more people involved and engaged and interested in what's going on in Japanese politics. That's my pitch. Thanks, Maya.
Yes. Okay. Thank you, Timothy. To everybody who is listening to us, thank you for supporting the human side of Timothy and be human anyway. So, and yes, Timothy, we have talked about this, but thank you for being authentic, and for being human, of course, not too polished, because if we want polished, we can go to any TV channel. So thanks for being the way you are. And
thank you.
Thank you. So to everybody in Clubhouse, also on YouTube, thanks for sticking with us today. We ran a little bit longer than usual. I hope that it is fine by you. And of course, if you need to check any of the parts of this briefing, you can go back to Clubhouse. You can also watch us on YouTube and Facebook. I also shared the link, sign-up link for the bi-weekly newsletter of Japan Expert Insights. So if you want to receive updates and also articles about what is happening in Japan as a business environment, please sign up and be with us. Also, I would like to ask you to check if you have subscribed already, please open your emails, the newsletter, of course, because otherwise the system will unsubscribe you automatically after a couple of times. So be warned about this. Thanks a lot. And there is one more person, Timothy. Sorry, we haven't finished yet, obviously. So this is Zach. Zach?
Hi, Zach.
Hello. You have
Hello,
a question?
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, good morning to you, Maya, Timothy, everybody else in the room. Yeah, I just want to make a comment about what you're doing, and I find it very interesting. Actually, we learn lots of things. I've attended few times, and I've learned few things. Although I'm living here in Japan, and sometimes I don't pay attention to so many things, being busy and stuff like that. So thank you for that. But I have a question, if you don't mind, probably outside the subject a little bit. Do you mind?
No, not at all.
Okay, thank you. It's just like, it's still to do with business and this Banpaku and stuff like that. It's just like, I've been here for a long time in Japan and still don't understand the way the Japanese people do business with foreigners in general. Although probably you have the right product, the right things, everything is perfect, but they still have to stick to, Japanese companies, and they do business, most of the time, with the Japanese business. I will give you an example now. For example, my company is trying to import some fish from Morocco, and specifically, the octopus taco, which is a really good brand from Morocco, the west coast of Africa, Mauritania, Morocco.
Famous.
And the prices are really good. And probably when we've done that and we found the right partner, we'll probably go to the magro, the black tuna, But the thing is, sorry, I'm jumping here and there. Forgot to tell you the problem of Tohoku, the nuclear plant, added a problem to the fishing industry in Japan. And you can see China, they don't want to buy the Chinese fish. So it was a good opportunity. So we did lots of contact with lots of shosha and stuff like that. But They gave us appointments. We went, we made them. They got the samples, everything. They're so happy. But then again, the last minute, the prices are perfect. Nothing. So they changed their mind, and and we are going to the marine festival, the marine show in Makharin next month for 3 days to get more customers and stuff like that. So I really don't understand why you can see the Chinese way. I don't know, or the foreign way is like clear. You have the product. I have a good price. Let's negotiate, and that's it. Done deal. Very, very clear. Forward. So, what is the problem, Timothy? Thank you.
What a great question, and you've been here for a long time, and you've experienced this through your friends and colleagues who are similarly situated. It's part of doing business in Japan. It has always been that way. Japan is an island country. It really doesn't want to trade with anybody else, except on their terms. And this has been a perennial problem with people who come to Japan. They purchase or they set up a company, they rent some space, they hire some people, they pay their taxes, they develop their product, they match it to meet the Japanese consumer needs because they've done market research, and nothing happens. So the business that I'm in actually is to address that particular issue. So when Apple Computer was first coming here, they experienced exactly the same issue. NEC was selling all of the computers and they were crappy, but everybody was purchasing them. And Apple was coming in with DEC and Compact Computer around the same time. And Apple hired me not only to be their general counsel, but also to help figure out how they can do this business so that the Japanese government does not favor their competitors over them. They have legitimate concerns. They have legitimate products that meet the market need, and artificially they're being prevented from putting their product on the shelf. And so I had a good run with Apple. As a consequence of that work, we were able to actually open, get away from this restrictive agreement that we had with Canon copiers, Canon services. So they were our sales channel, and we broke away from that. And now it's completely different. Japan, Apple has its own distribution system, whereas before you didn't. General Motors hired me to do basically the same thing. They can't sell their cars. I mean, this is famous. Toyota is building cars here. They're great cars. Japan is dominant throughout the world in selling cars. General Motors wanted to sell their cars here too. There is a market niche that appeals to our customer base, and we're not being able to sell them. People just say, why don't you put the steering wheel on the other side, and why don't you move the rear view mirror, and all this crap. We have a good product. Why don't you just let us sell it? So that is where I cut my teeth. That's what I do for a business. I try and help people to sell their product in this country. You're not the only person that has difficulty with that. And that's what I do for a living. I've got a company that's all we do. Foreign capital companies hire us because they have the exact same problem. There is a market for that kind of a service to help people overcome the barriers, the artificial restrictions, the paperwork, and all of those things. It's just a difficult business. It's Japan is a very difficult place to do business and to be successful here. The road between Tokyo and Narita is littered with the carcasses of companies that have tried that over and over again. I mean, it's more companies fail here than succeed. So I think if you need a little bit of muscle and you need some extra help, there are a few companies that do it, but think of earmarking some funds for exploring that avenue too, because we've been successful at it. How's that?
Zach?
Yeah. Thank you, Tim. I understand. I'm actually open to many things. It's just to continue on what you said. The Chinese government, if you can look this, on the internet, they were very quick because they could. The Japanese also, I don't know, liaising this with politics, our subject today. I don't know whether they don't see the global politics or something. The Chinese, they could read the problem between the EU and the Moroccan government. in regards to the fishing agreements between the two governments. And this time, I think they didn't renew the contract between the EU and the Moroccan fishing stuff because of the conflict of the Western Sahara. So the Chinese, they moved very fast, and they went aside and they signed a big agreement between the Moroccan government and the Chinese, in regards to fishing. And you can see how this is linked to. That's why they probably flexed their muscles. I mean, the government, they said, we're not going to buy the Japanese fish because they are contaminated. So while the Japanese are sleeping, I mean, the prices of fish are going up, and inflation, and people are not eating fish, which is very important, in Japanese diet. So I cannot understand the mentality. Really, it's frustrating when you get this opportunity in here in front of you, and it's crazy. It's I don't know.
Yeah.
But yeah, I'm willing to get in touch with consulting companies, whatever. I don't know. So yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Should contact Timothy.
I hope.
Yes.
I hope I didn't pitch my wares too hard. I don't mean to. But in my experience, the Chinese, they're very motivated by making a profit. Whereas in Japan, there are various interest groups that require protection. And this is the cause of friction between Japan and all of their trading partners, that even though the logic would dictate that they might make a decision here, they protect the vested interests that they have because they depend on their votes, or they depend on the policies. And the Fishermen's Union especially is really strong here. I spend a lot of time on the water, and the Fishermen's Union really dominates the coastal areas throughout Japan. They have a very, very strong and tight political arm. So getting, even though it might make economic sense, the Japanese politicians and the bureaucrats are protecting these people, even though it might be better for the Japanese people, or it might make more money. It's a completely different mix, but I know you know that too.
Yes, and also there is a comment from David. Sorry to cut you short, Zach, but David says that in addition to that, Japanese politicians aren't sleeping. They simply don't trust their potential partners easily.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's another thing. That's a very big thing. And we talk about this actually quite a lot, about trust. And how difficult it is to build it here in Japan, especially if you come from outside. And Zach, there are quite a lot of levels here. Yes, it's complex.
Yeah, about the trust is the Japanese culture. I'm sorry, I'm going to say it. In Japanese, it's like always like this. They're always undecided. I'm not being critical. No, but it's just like in business, you have to be clear cut. Yaruka, yaranai ka, kangaichu, yaruka, yaranai ka, kangaichu. And the product is gone. Bye bye, my friend. It's all gone.
Well, it's like we were saying with the truck drivers and with my number system, the zero tolerance for mistakes or for disappointment. If I'm the person who is in charge of cutting that deal, and then all of a sudden the octopuses they're not coming in the volume that was supposed to be agreed to, I'm the one that takes the hit for that. And there's no tolerance for that. I'll lose my job, or people will stop buying beers for me after work, or, there's just such a low level of tolerance. So you stick with what works, you stick with what you were trained to do, and you try not to deviate. So that's one of the aspects of Japanese contemporary society that, I think there's movement away from it, but still this risk aversion is pervasive.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I'm just going to continue just a little bit and probably give chance to other colleagues to debate. Like, I give you an example. For example, in the hospitality business, when I was in the hospitality business, I mean, most of the GMs in 5-star hotels are foreigners, because you need to be clear cut. You need to be strict, and you don't hesitate in this kind of things. I never met any. Probably in one of the hotels in Ginza, I forgot the name of the hotel. It was only the only Japanese general manager who was there. Otherwise, all the other brands, hotels, all foreigners. This is the mentality, the culture. I don't know.
It is a technology. It's a technology. I've known most of the general managers, because like you said, it's a limited number. There are maybe 25 of these guys, and then others who are running not the 5-star, but the 4-star hotels as well. They appeal to a foreign clientele, and the foreigners have a particular need that needs to be addressed, and not everybody wants to have a set menu consisting of toast and an egg and coffee from a dispenser. So it's just a completely different level of service.
Yes. Okay. Thank you very much, Zach.
Thank you, Maya. Thank you so much.
Thank you,
you.
Zach. Nice having you in the audience.
Thank you.
Yes.
Thanks a lot.
Thank you very much indeed for your insights, the questions and observations. And well, Timothy, I'm ready to let you go because I also know that you have quite a few things to do. Okay, be careful with your makeup there. So again, thank you very much for staying with us and your questions. Hiroko, thanks a lot for offering help. We can use all the help we can get. So anytime, please feel free to chime in, to comment, and let us know where we actually can enhance the delivery and the information. That's all for today. Timothy, well, yes? Okay, go ahead.
No, I was just going to suggest, Maya, that you should organize another beer event. I mean, maybe not in August, but September or October.
Okay.
That was so much fun, and I think it's getting together, and that's how people who would like to participate and contribute. I mean, that's easy. You can come and buy me a beer or something. That would be fun.
Yes, definitely. Okay, so there will be another event. I don't know whether it will be in the end of August or in the end of September. Probably the end of September. However, we'll keep you informed about it. Thanks a lot for today. Please subscribe for our newsletter, the bi-weekly one, and come again next week, Sunday at 8:20.
Hit like, subscribe, and share this with your network. Share it with your friends. Make a comment, say something funny. Let's continue this dialogue throughout the week until we meet next week. Next week is going to be loaded. There's a lot going on this next week, and I'm looking forward to reporting to you next Sunday at 8:20. Thanks.
Thank you. That's it. And well, Timothy, you